Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. It is 1 o'clock Eastern and time for Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. And boy, do we need to do that as we are looking at you, 2023. Here we come. And today I have a leadership expert, author, speaker, consultant, just all around amazing guy and good friend, Bill Treasure, joining me today. How you doing, Bill?
Meredith, it's so good to be with you. Heck, you and I, we could have been sitting in a coffee house like really close by, but it's great to be with you live on Thrive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we both live here in Asheville, North Carolina, and the biggest difference between Bill and I is that Bill has his Christmas shopping done. I do not. But still, we are going to plunge ahead and talk about a really important subject today because, Bill, I think as we look at 2023, probably nothing is more important than leadership. So hold tight. We're going to come back right after this video, dive into your thoughts, your expertise, and your new book that has just hit the marketplace about how you lead with just 2 words. All right, again, welcome back to Thrive and welcome again to Bill Treasure, our guest today, owner, founder of Giant Leap Consulting. Bill, start out by telling the audience just a little bit about you. You're such a unique background.
Well, thanks for asking it. I don't know where to start. So I've had my company for 20 years, Giant Leap Consulting. We're a courage building company. We help people and organizations drive out fear so that they can get superior performance and be more courageous in their interactions with one another. I've been doing that for 20 years, fortunate to be doing it, have a terrific client list that I enjoy. It's passionate work that I get to do. Before that, I worked with a company called Accenture. It's one of the world's largest management and technology consulting companies. I was their first full-time internal executive coach, and I was coaching leaders, pretty much all of whom outranked me and had more leadership experience. But I learned a ton in that process, and I hope that they benefited as well. Before that, a couple of other consulting companies and graduate school, and I studied leadership in graduate school. And before that, this is kind of why I named my company Giant Leap Consulting. I used to be a professional high diver, and I used to dive off of 100-foot radio towers into small pools for a living, traveling at speeds in excess of 50 miles an hour before hitting a small pool that was about 10 feet deep, protected only by a Speedo. How about that? That's probably a little TMI for your audience there. But yeah, I was a professional high diver on the U.S. high diving team, traveled all around the world, and I'm a high diver who's afraid of heights. And it was that process of learning how to not have that fear dominate me that I activated and learned about courage. And it was such a meaningful experience for me. I realized that this is something that's important in the workplace too.
Oh my gosh. So I have so many questions I want to ask you today, but the biggest is the fact that, you would be hard pressed to talk to a CEO or a head of human resources today, head of talent acquisition, that they don't say leadership is probably the most important. The better the leaders there are in the organization. Why do we invest so little time and so little energy into leadership development?
I think that sometimes it's just that treadmill churn of pushing out productive work that we're so on to the next item on the to-do list, and that's at every level in the organization, that we are not thoughtful enough about who are we putting in those leadership roles. It's like, oh, this project is thinly staffed. We just need a warm body. Hey, you go be the leader. And we don't have a thoughtful process of identifying and then navigating and situating and developing and mentoring that person to help them be successful in the role. And so a lot of people get moved into a leadership position, sort of just being pushed out into the river of this fast moving stream of work. and relying on social Darwinism, right? So like,
Yeah.
are they, is it going to be survival of the fittest? And with some of my companies, clients who,
Mhm.
many construction companies that I work with, that's how they do it. That they look to see, hey, can you swim in this fast moving water? And if you can, then you must be a leader, instead of having sort of a thoughtful process to transition them into the leadership role.
So how much, here we're in the midst of the great resignation. I mean, talent remains a really big challenge. And interestingly enough, even though everybody is talking softening economy, inflation, there still is so much pressure on the labor market. What are some of your thoughts around that?
Mm, it's a really funky time, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure you're seeing that too. I think in 2019, all of us didn't really realize what a crazy train that we were on.
Right.
We were just like, furiously working in that, and that's kind of the spirit and ethos of the American way of being. And then we all got into COVID, and I don't know about you, but I speak for myself. And I had calendar dates flying off the calendar, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, what are we going to do? And then we start making the pivot to doing sessions virtually and such, and we start to figure it out, and then we start to get into a little bit of a groove of, hey, I can actually make business happen and be productive while I'm working at home. And we get into a groove that starts to getting into a little bit too comfortable. So now we try to get back to work, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't really want to go back to 2019. So can I have some time where I'm working at home and some when I'm back in the office? And we have this kind of hybrid moment. And I don't think that we have fully figured it out yet, what it's going to look like. I think it's emergent. I mean, we're still, hopefully we're beyond the thrust of
Yeah.
COVID, but there, it's still lingering around. So we're not really sure. I know that many owners, you probably find it, they want people back to work in the
Yeah.
offices, most of them, but a few companies have said we don't even need people back at work at all. So we're trying to figure out this funky moment. What I will say though is that the need for leadership does not go away. And learning
Wow.
to lead in this hybrid moment it presents its own challenges, but some of the fundamentals of leadership don't go away, regardless of if it's a hybrid moment or a work from home moment or a at work moment. Some leadership principles remain the same.
Yeah, and I would say that, as we look at 2023 and the promises that of challenge that it is offering, that probably leadership is going to be more important than I think, it's so funny now. I think we look at COVID and we thought about what a challenge COVID was. And now that we look at everything looming on looming out there. I mean, whoever thought we'd have war in Europe again? Whoever really
Right.
thought we'd be looking at rising gas prices? And unless you're as old as we are, you don't remember interest rates being up in the, in the
7%.
yeah,
Right.
exactly,
Yeah.
in the digits and things that we're looking now. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you think that whether they're CEOs of large companies make or smaller family owned businesses are making around leadership today, whether it's their own or whether it's developing other leaders?
Yeah, I think that, one thing I remember one time, you bring up an interesting point. You and I have been through these cycles before. Maybe there's
Yeah.
some uniqueness to some of the things that are happening for sure, but we've been through recessions
Yes.
before, for example. You and I have been through the dot-com implosion. You and I have seen the housing market implode. And you've seen the recoveries after those things. I remember years ago, back when I was at Accenture, and I had a wonderful boss who really he epitomized what a great leader should be. I had read about it in books, but I was always disappointed in the leaders that I worked with until I worked for this guy. And I remember one time, it was in 2001, the dot coms were, imploding. I was losing money in the market. Many other people were as well. And I walked into my boss's office and I'm like, should I, should I build a basement and start prepping and start canning goods and putting them in my, it was in one of these moments. And he said, Bill, I know this is uncomfortable for you, and I want you to know that you're going to get through this. I'm going to get through this. I've been through it about 7 times in my career, and this is a normal
Mhm.
cycle to be going through. So I think like one of the mistakes that, and he didn't make it, but one mistake that leaders sometimes make is freaking out and putting gas on
Yeah.
the fire. And it's important, especially for leaders, to be the one who is the adult in the room, who's composed and reasonable and doesn't freak out. And that was what my boss's name was, Heinz Brannon, was so good at. He could be the reasonable one when everything else was looking insane around him. And that taught me something about a longer game. Instead of making these hip shoot from the hip reactive kind of moves in this freak out moment, what can I do to be thoughtful and intentional about a future and creating the future for the organization, instead of being reactive when other people are actually needing my composure, especially people that are coming up because they haven't had these experiences that I've had.
Yeah. What a great point. I think I really haven't heard somebody bring that up as an impact of a leader, but it is so true. Yesterday, I was leaving a meeting for the National Speakers Association, and I was catching a flight really early to the airport. And I was with the president of the National Speakers Association. She runs the organization, and we were running late to a flight. In fact, when we got to the airport, the flight was boarding. All my energy inside of me is completely freaking out. She was so calm. And now that I really think about it, what an impact that had on me. I mean, we got there, we got on the plane, everything was fine. But a leader who is just sure of what we're doing, where we're going, and that it is going to work out really has a strong effect on the organization.
Yeah, what a leader transmits. There's a term that I don't know came out of, I think, Harvard maybe 5-7 years ago, and it's called an emotional contagion.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that whatever you're transmitting emotionally is going to get passed on to others, not just when you're in a leadership role, by the way. It passes through networks of people, but when you're in a leadership role, it's pretty powerful, because
Right.
if you as a leader start freaking out at decibel 8, you can be guaranteed your people are going to be transmitting that at
Yeah.
decibel 10, right?
Yeah.
And so it's managing that, and it gets to this central idea of composure. I have a whole chapter in the book on cultivating composure, and it starts with, how do you start your day? By the way, I've had plenty of those late runs to the flight and be like, I'm gonna make money tomorrow if I don't get on this flight today. I'm not gonna,
Right.
I've had all that stuff happen. So I have to work on cultivating composure. I'm certainly not the master of this, but I know about the importance of it. How do you start your day? And a lot of people start by getting quickly into the to-do list, shooting down the interruptions like it's a game of Space Invaders, instead of sort of allowing themselves to ease in the day, be thoughtful about the day. I love Ben Franklin's 2 questions. He starts in the beginning of the day with, what good shall I do in the world today? And at the end of the day, he bookends it with, what good in the world have I done today?
Yeah.
And it's being thoughtful. I read I'm in my out office. There's a little book on that shelf right there. I like it a lot. It's The Daily Stoic. It's by Ryan Holiday, and it gives me some Stoic wisdom from 2,000 years ago, typically from Marcus Aurelius. And it gives me a single paragraph or 2 to read, 1 page. But it's a way
Nice.
of easing my way thoughtfully with some ancient wisdom, being thoughtful about who does Bill Treasurer want to be in the world today. Put the craziness aside, because I'm going to hit it in a moment. I'm going to be right into that craziness. But let me start with some centeredness and composure so I can be thoughtful about my day. And I think that that's a great way for leaders to start their day, is to be intentional, be thoughtful, be purposeful, be reflective, because you're going to get caught up in the crazy, and your people are going to be taking signals and cues for you. And you can do a lot of damage in the world when you're a leader if you're in freak out mode.
Yeah, and I think leaders really underestimate how much impact they have. I was telling a CEO the other day, because he's frustrated his team isn't focused on the right things. And I said, you need to realize that if you walked into the room and said, I think we should be chewing more gumballs, that people are all of a sudden going to start chewing more gumballs because you said that. Now, there's a downside to it. There's also a huge upside. If you are mindful of what you talk about and what you focus on, people will follow you to that point, but you have to be mindful and thoughtful of what you say, and then what you're adding to it, the energy that, truly the energy that comes off of you. But I love that you focused on simplicity, because I think it is such a great lead in into your new book, Leadership 2 Words at a Time. And I'm going to be honest, Bill, when I saw the title, I was like, how can you lead 2 words at a time? Now, I am a speaker, so probably more exhausting and verbose than others. But where did the idea for the book, come from? I mean, had this been something that you had been thinking about for years, or was it something that, you saw and thought, oh, that's really how leadership needs to happen?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a confluence of a couple of things. One is about 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Leaders Open Doors, and it was inspired by my then 5-year-old son. And he had gotten to be the class leader for a day. He's 16 now, so I guess it's 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And he got to be class leader, and I asked him, hey, my son, I teach leadership, and my son got to be class leader. What did you get to do as class leader, son? And he said, I got to open doors for people. And I thought, wow, that's so centrally what leadership is about. And I wrote a book with simplicity being the emphasis on the book. And it's called Leaders Open Doors, that idea of opening doors for others. And what that experience, and I had to keep the voice of simplicity while I wrote that book, because I realized, and I even say it in the book, that a lot of leadership writers, a lot of authors in general, are what I call the Legion of Leadership Complexifiers, the LLC. We try to complexify and nuance ideas around leadership. And sometimes it's not about providing the reader with ideas that are useful and actually work. It's more about proving to the leader how smart we are, to the reader. And that's the wrong motive. And I used to do that with some of my books. I like those past books, but they're really about using big SAT words to be like, we should dimensionalize this. The strategic value added proposition is that, and and this book was about, let's get simple. Right. And simple is not easy.
No, it's hard.
Simple is hard. So that was one thing. That's 10 years ago. And at that time, I had already started to catalog 2-word concepts that I thought were really essential to leadership. Values, being one of them. And then this second thing happened. As I was coaching my coachees, and I know you do a lot of executive coaching as well.
Yeah.
I found that if I asked a coachee who was all twined up about something, if I said, hey, if you could just narrow it in the fewest amount of words, what's the thing that you think you need to do to help resolve this issue? And the fewer the words that they used, the more likely they were to actually take action on the thing that they had narrowed it to. An example is, I had this guy who really wanted to be a partner. And at this firm that he worked at, he was associate partner, and he was really giving off this intensity of like, I really want, how desperately can I'm going to get my money if I do that, and how can I have that? And the people that were partners were like, this guy's too intense. He's a little too desperate, and he needs that calm composure he's not showing. So when I asked him, what are the 2 words that you think you really need? Oh, no, I said, what's the fewest amount of words that you could tell me that what you need? He said, I guess I need calm, confidence. I need to show others that I am calm and I'm confident. And I was like, bing. And that's what we worked on, calm confidence. And then he'd get ready to go to a meeting and he'd be like, hey, I'm going to the meeting with the partners, CC. That was his little calm confidence. And I found that other coachees, if I could get them to narrow in the fewest amount of words, and often it would come down to just 2 words, that they do the thing. So then I decided to put those ideas together. Something simple for new leaders that isn't overbearing, it isn't burdensome, that when they're like, oh, all the things I need to do as a leader, like, no, just take the thing right in front of you right now. What's the 2 words you need to hang on to deal with that particular situation? And so the book has a suite of 2-word kind of essentials around leadership.
I love that you can, he ended up sort of using it as a mantra. And so it was an easy touchstone for him, to come back to. So you wrote the book in 3 specific areas. I mean, leading yourself, leading people, and leading the work. And I had wondered when I was reading it, is that a building block? Is it that way for a leader? Do we need to start out with leading ourselves, leading others, and ultimately that goes to leading the organization? Or are those just the 3 pieces that we need to be mindful of?
I do think that if there is a step order to it, then and I call these the three areas that make up
Yeah.
leadership fitness. Are you fit to lead?
Mhm.
Are you leading yourself? Are you disciplined? Do you use your time well? Do you prioritize well? Are you thoughtful? Do you have self-knowledge and self-awareness? Are you self-evaluative? So leading work is about, hey, you got to lead and inspire teams of people. That's different than leading yourself, because it's not about your own ambition and your own climb. It's about getting the most out of others. Do you work for them and help them be successful? Do you build trust well? Are you emotionally intelligent about what's going on with them? So leading others. Then the third area of the book is leading work, and that's making sure you're mitigating risks, that you understand the piece parts of the business that pull the levers that make money or lose money. How do you increase margin? So those three areas. If there's one that I think you've got to start with, it's leading yourself.
Mm.
You really aren't qualified to lead others until you are disciplined and thoughtful about. You can't. It doesn't help you to be an oblivious to yourself kind of leaders. There are some leaders who are oblivious to themselves, have no self-awareness and no self-knowledge, and I think that really limits a leader. So I think leading yourself first. And actually, I had a conversation with John Ryan, who used to be the CEO and president of the Center for Creative Leadership.
Mhm.
He was a vice admiral in the Navy. He ran all State University of New York schools. There were 65 campuses. He was,
Wow.
I think, he was the dean at Annapolis. And he said it to me. He's like, it's got to start with you. It's like, you can't. What qualifies you to lead other people if you can't lead and manage yourself? I had another person say, if you can't lead yourself out of a paper bag, why should you be qualified to lead others? So I think that there's some truth to that. You got to lead yourself. The other two kind of go hand in hand, because when you are leading people in a project environment, you're helping marshal them to be productive. They're charging the hill and some challenge or an opportunity that is, by its nature, affecting business and work. What I want for the leading work part is for people to stop being intimidated by business.
Mm.
Business can be intimidated when you're a new leader, or younger in your career. Can be really intimidating to be around people who use fancy pants words, who have a furrow on their brow, who've been in their position longer, who've got gray hair, long in the tooth, and it can be really intimidating. But if you lean into business, you know it. I know you know it.
Yeah.
It is wildly creative. You get to apply your full engagement. You get to solve and resolve issues. You get to make decisions that may not bear fruit for 3 or 4 years, and then it's wonderful to see that happen. You get to work with colleagues where you go through hardship and you triumph together. Business is fantastic if you lean into it and allow yourself to carry the discomfort early on and learn, what a wonderful canvas we get to play on with business.
Yeah, I think that I was so intrigued when I got to the part of leading work, because I think in so many other leadership books or leadership training, that is the piece that is left out. And until you understand the business, until you understand how the business makes money, how the business loses money, what the sales cycle is through the business, the supply chain, the inventory,
Mm.
all those things that seem confusing and come with all these big words, you don't understand the business. And I tell every young leader that I'm working for, walk into your supervisor's office, your leader's office, and say, I want to understand how the business makes money. Don't be surprised if they don't know. You might have to go as far as, as the CFO. But I know when I started out as a young leader, I was fortunate enough to work for a gentleman who sat down with pen and paper and said, I want you to understand how the company makes money. And it was so empowering to me, because
Yes.
now I understood how to apply people. I understood where to make price breaks, where not to make price breaks. I was so much better from a
Yeah.
negotiation standpoint. And it wasn't that I was stupid before. It just was, if nobody explains that to you. So I think your book is so powerful because it covers all three levers of leadership. And so often that third lever is left out.
I totally agree. We get in our functionality or department, whatever, and we're working on our task in front of. Maybe we've got the project team within the department, and maybe 2 project teams, but it's lifting our heads up and to be able to see the entire
Yeah.
enterprise and how our department impacts the work of another, and how it relies on the work that's coming to us, and how my work actually is connected to revenue generation, and how even if I'm in a cost center in the business, how it mitigates risk somewhere else that actually helps us preserve money. But it's all those piece parts that you're right, that
Yeah.
it's often neglected as being taught to people. And I think it's so important. In my case, I was lucky because I was in a role for a little while at Accenture that was kind of like a chief of staff role. So I had to go to different functions and I mean the department heads
Yeah.
of those functions, and bring the reports and the work back and gather things from the the person that I was walking, the managing partner, and I had to sometimes be his emissary, going to different groups, and I got to interact with all those groups and saw how they sort of fit together. And I realized that's a really important piece of business to know.
Yeah. And, it's sort of all of this kind of dovetails back to where we started the conversation, right? I mean, the moment that I understood how the business worked, and I'm in a meeting with the CFO and I'm presenting an idea, and he or she is saying that's going to negatively impact profitability. Well, now that I understand how the company makes money, I'm in a position to confidently counter why my idea will actually drive profitability
Yeah.
rather than, it just changes the entire perspective. And here's the good news, audience. You can learn it all 2 words at a time, right?
Yes, you
Right.
can. You
Yeah, Bill, it is so hard to believe, but we are near the end of the podcast and we have scratched the surface. You got to be willing to come back on because I have about
Anytime.
a thousand other questions. So I always close out with 2 questions, and you can answer them any way that you want to answer them. Whichever one comes first is fine. How do people get a hold of you? How do they find out more information? How did they get the book? Leadership 2 Words at a Time, and quite frankly, all the other books that you have written. And then, as we're looking at 2023, leadership is going to be so much more important. Not that it hasn't always been vital, but when the economy gets wherever the heck it's going, good or bad, we do not know. Leadership is vital to help people navigate uncertainty. What is your biggest piece of advice? If you're going to tell people to focus in one particular area as it relates to leadership, what would that be?
So I'll start with the first one. They can find me at giantleapconsulting.com. You can actually email me at btreasurer@giantleapconsulting.com, the longest email in the history of emails. You can find my company at couragebuilding.com. It's an easy way to find the company. You can find the book at all online retailers. Go to the big one, go to the small one. And yeah, so what do I think is centrally super important for leaders to focus on most right now? I mean, like right now, this is a great time of year. For me, and I imagine for you, certainly many businesses, that many businesses go into their planning cycle right now. A lot
Yeah.
of strategic plans happen in January, right? Or late December, early January, they go into the planning cycle. I've got a 4-day one coming up in late January, a 4-day one coming up in February, that where I'm facilitating strategic planning, and they're already in the business planning to get to the strategic plan. But you as a leader should be doing that kind of thing too. This is a great year to clean slate, take a quick reflection on how did 2022 go relative to what you had hoped to achieve, your goals, career-wise and business-wise, and now reset them. Now say, okay, when I forecast out, and yeah, you probably want to consider that there might be a recession. How are you going to recession-proof your business and yourself and your career? So are there some moves that you might want to make? But what are the intentions that you'd like to set that for 2023, so that at the end of 2023, you can look back and evaluate that you were intentional about what you wanted to get done, and that you can thoughtfully be able to track, did I do the things that I wanted? So I do it every year. I get my PowerPoint actually, and I put
Yeah.
together and I can look back at what I did the year before, and then I set the new ones. So it's a really important time of year going into and it'll give you some confidence. It'll drive some of the fear out. Part of what we get so fearful of is when we have a sense of not knowing, that
Yeah.
everything is up in the air or facing uncertainty. But if you can set goals with intentionality, it starts to give you a prioritization list to march into 2023 with. So I'd say that would probably be my biggest piece of advice.
I
And
love it.
start your day with composure.
I love reflect and reset and set your goals with intentionality, and that feeling of it really is a mindset to think whether you're in control or prepared to handle. And it is funny that if you slow down, reset, start with composure, you're in a much better position. Well, Bill, I can't thank you enough for being a guest today. We're going to put all that information in the show notes. I once again want to thank everybody for joining us for Thrive. And you know what? Next week, we're going to be taking a holiday, but right back at the beginning of 2023, we'll be back for another episode of Thrive and another opportunity to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. Have a great holiday, whatever you celebrate and however you celebrate.